Welcome to this video. We have been seeing the routing algorithms. In this, we have already seen two types of algorithms, or we have been seeing the algorithm categories like non-adaptive, in the sense that they once calculate the shortest path from a given source to a given destination, and then do not take into account the changes in the topology. Whereas, we have seen Dijkstra's algorithm in this category, which calculates the shortest path from a given source and destination pair. But that is static in the sense that it is once calculated, uh, it is never changed henceforth. Actually, what happens in a real network, the topology may sometimes be changed because of there may be some routers or lines coming up or going down. So the path which was initially optimum or shortest may not be the shortest one after the topology changes. And that's why we need to resort to the second category of adaptive or dynamic routing algorithms. So today we'll see two such algorithms. One is called as the distance vector routing, and the second is the link state routing. So the first, distance vector routing algorithm, obviously it's a dynamic routing or adaptive routing, we can say. So here in this algorithm, each router maintains a vector or table which contains the best known distance to each destination and the outgoing line along with that distance. So for example, it will be having the best known distances to the routers in that particular subnet and the path which is taken to reach that particular destination or that router. We'll see with that one example. So these tables are also frequently updated by exchanging this information with their neighbors. Here the metric that is used for the distance calculation may be, as we have seen previously, that may be, for example, the number of hops, how many routers are required to go to a particular destination. That may be the physical distance in kilometers to approach that destination. Kilometers or miles it can be, or it may be the propagation delay, that is the time delay to reach a particular destination. So any one of these it may be. Now, given to that metric, each router is assumed to know the distance to each of its neighbors. So here in this one example is given of a subnet, and this diagram depicts that subnet where the nodes are the routers and the links are the communication lines which are connecting them. Now we'll see how the distance vector routing works with respect to a particular router Z and its neighbors like A, I, H, and K. Now the same thing goes for the remaining routers as well. Now, as we have just seen, each individual router will be generating or will be having those vectors or tables. Now the neighbors of Z, that is A, I, H, and K, they will be having their own vectors like given here in this particular section. So A report or has got the vector in this way. So A to A distance is obviously 0. A has already calculated or knows the distance to B in milliseconds in this example. For example, A to B distance is said to be 12 milliseconds. Similarly, A to C distance is said to be 25 milliseconds, which has been calculated by A, and so on and so forth. So this is how A generates its vector. So basically it contains the delay to reach that particular destination in milliseconds. Similarly, there is one vector for I, H, and K. So for example, I to B distance is 36 milliseconds, and so on. Similarly, the delay to reach Z from each of its neighbor is also given, that is Z delay is 8, ZA delay is 8, ZI delay is 10. So here the physical distance, if the diagram is up to the scale, is drawn up to the scale, the Z distance is seen to be more in physical parameters as compared to ZI distance, but there may be some properties of the line, for example the load on the line, or maybe the bandwidth of the line. So that may cause, even though it is physically longer, the bandwidth is more or the load is lesser, and that's why the ZI distance in milliseconds is smaller than, ZI distance in milliseconds is smaller than that of ZI. So next is H and K similarly. So JH distance is 12 milliseconds and JK distance is 6 milliseconds. Now these are the vectors which are then forwarded to, or given transmitted to Z. And based on this information which is received from the neighbors, J will now calculate its vector as it is given here. So to each of the destination here, for example JA, it is already known that it is 8. So JA will be 8. Okay, so the distance is known to Z. Next, B. So Z needs to approach B. So the neighbors of I, how exactly the distance, final distance is calculated to B. So for example, it will first identify what is the distance to B from its neighbors. So A claims to have a distance in milliseconds to B as 12. I will be 36, H is 31 and K is 28. So the distance from Z to A is 8 and A to B is 12. So it will take 20. So 8 plus 12. 8 plus 12. So it will take 20 milliseconds to reach B from Z through A. Now if J wishes to go through I to B, so I to B distance is 36, I to B distance is 36 and J to I distance is 10. So obviously it will take 36 plus 10, so 46 milliseconds to reach B as compared to the previous distance of 20. Next, if J wishes to go through H, the HB distance is 31, which is reported by H. HB distance is 31 and JH distance is 12. So 31 plus 12, so it will be 43. Similarly, for if J attempts to go through B to B through K, so the JK distance is 6, but KB distance is 28. So it will take 28 plus 6, 34 to reach B through K. So if we now compare the ultimate additions of through all these neighbors, it appears that the least distance is through A, that is 12 plus 8, 20. And that's why A now finalizes that to approach B, to reach B, it can go through A with a distance of 20, and now that's how this entry is created. So A will always reach B until the topology changes through A with a distance of 20 milliseconds. So similarly, other calculations can also be done. Now there may be we'll see one entry E. So to reach E, A claims to have a distance of 14. So similarly, JA distance is 8. So 14 plus 8, 22. I claims to have a distance to E as 7. So JI distance is 10. So it is 17. Next, H claims to have a distance of 30. So accordingly, J's distance is 12. So it will be 42. And K claims to have a distance of 22 to E, whereas the JK distance is 6. So it will be in all 28. So the least distance which is found out is 70, which is through I. So this is how the rest of the lines or the distances are calculated, and this is how the new routing table for J will be generated. So this is what is called as the distance vector routing, and it appears to be a good routing algorithm until we know there is one problem or two problems we the distance vector routing may be having. So these are called as the count to infinity problem. So in short, whenever a router goes down and whenever a router comes up, there may be some problems or there may be some delay in knowing that change. So we will first assume what happens, or we'll first see one example when a router which was initially down, next it comes up, and what happens. So imagine in this subnet which is shown here, A was initially down. So the rest of the nodes, the routers B, C, D and E, they reported the distance to reach A as infinity, which is shown with dots here, field circles. Now the instance when A comes up, what happens? It is the B which initially gets the information that it can reach A with a hopping distance. Let us say the distance matrix is now the hopping distance. So it can reach A with a hopping distance of 1. So B now has got the new distance to reach A as 1, which was initially infinity. So after one exchange, what happens? So B has got the new entry to reach A as 1, which was initially infinity, but the exchanged information for C, D and E is still the previous knowledge to B, C, D, which is infinity. That's why the rest of the nodes will have the distance to A as infinity only. This is the situation after one exchange. So the exchange means that whatever that was previously with the router, that will be given to the neighbors. So C exchanges the value of infinity to B, but B directly can reach A with a distance of 1, and that's why B stores the least value, that is 1, uh, in its routing table. Now after two exchanges, what happens? Now here B will exchange the new value, which is 1, to C, and accordingly it has also got one value like infinity from D. So 1 and infinity, so 1 is least, that's why C will now calculate. C knows that it can approach B with a hopping distance of 1, and B claims to have a distance of 1 to A, that's why C will be updating its value to 2. In the same in line with the same previous discussion, D and E, they have got the infinity as the distance to A, and they will store infinity in this case as well. And similarly, the last two lines will be updated. So this is how after 4 exchanges, all remaining 4 routers in that subnet get to know that A can be reached with a finite distance. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 for B, C, D and E respectively. in general, if there are, if the hopping distance or the maximum hopping distance in a given subnet is n, so here the maximum hopping distance from E to A is 4. So it will take n vector exchanges in the subnet for the all the routers to know that one of the router which was initially down has now come up. So the good news will propagate fast. Okay, so why I say fast will be clear when we see this example. Now imagine the second scenario in which a router, all the routers were up previously and one of the routers goes down. Let us blame A. So A once again goes down, which was previously up. So initial situation is as like this 1 2 3 4, which is taken here. But now that in the after first initial situation, before the first exchange happens, A goes down. So B cannot directly ping A. That's why B has got a new distance to A as infinity. But C claims to have one hopping distance of 2 to A, and that will be exchanged to B in after first exchange. So B knows that it cannot reach directly to A, but its neighbor, which is C, claims to have a distance of 2 to A. But rather here C has calculated distance to A through B itself, and B does not know this fact that C is claiming to have a distance of 2 to A, but that path goes to itself, B itself, where B knows that it cannot directly reach A, but C does not know that, and B does not know that C is going through A through itself only. And this is how B now has got two distances to A. One which is the direct approach, which is infinity, that means it cannot reach A, but through C with a distance of 1 to C and CA distance of 2, that means 2 plus 1 3, it logically concludes that it can reach A. So it updates the distance, new hopping distance to A as 3 after the first exchange. So the C exchanges 2 to B, and that's why. Similarly, the previous hopping distances to A from the remaining routers will be exchanged to their neighbors. So this is shown with those arrows. So this is what is called as the exchange, vector exchange. In the next exchange, what happens? So the previous distance will be exchanged like this. So B exchanges the new hopping distance to C, which is 3, and C knows that D also gives the new distance to A as 3, and that's how C, which knows that it can approach A through B or D, which are claiming to have a distance of 3 to A, but C can approach B or D with a hopping distance of 1. That's why C now updates the previous distance of 2 to 4 to reach A, because hopping distance to through B or through D is 4. Now the for D, what happens? It has got the old values only. So it was initially having 2 and 4. The same values are there after 2 exchanges. So no changes there with D, and similarly for E. In the next exchange, after third exchange, what happens? So C sends the same information which was previous to in the previous exchange to C, and B exchanges the same value to C. D exchanges the same value to C. So there is no change in the C, but C gives a new value to reach A to B, which was initially 3, which was initially 2, now it is 4. And as B knows that it can approach C with a hopping distance of 1, now it changes the value to 5. And the same goes with D as well. But there are no changes in C and E. And this is how the new calculations are calculated up to infinity. Now, practically, that infinity will not be possible. That's why to make it finite, we can have some finite value so that the routers know that they are approaching infinity. So that finite value can be 1 plus the maximum hopping distance in the subnet. So that when they approach that value, they know that they have reached infinity, and they can accordingly recalculate the they can try to converge. So this is how the time it takes to know a particular fact that a router has gone down. So the bad news, that will take more time to reach the remaining routers. So it will take more time to reach the whole subnet, for the news to reach the whole subnet that a router has gone down. So the good news propagates faster, whereas the bad news propagates. It takes longer to reach the routers. The bad news propagates. It will take longer. So this is what is called as count to infinity problem. The distance vector suffers from the count to infinity problem. So this is the drawback. The good news spreads rapidly, but it takes long time when there is bad news. It may finally converge, even though there are several attempts made to solve this problem, but none is appearing to be working perfectly. The reason why distance vector routing suffers from these problems is because of the two facts. It does not take the actual nature of the advertised path into account. Previously, we have seen that B does not know that what C claims to have a distance of 2 to A, that path is going through B itself, that is not identified by B. So the real nature of the advertised path is not taken into account. And when a particular bad news is there, it takes long to converge. Now, distance vector routing was used in ARPANET, the older net, until 1979. But when a new routing algorithm was found out, which was link state routing, it was then replaced by link state routing. Now we'll see the link state routing algorithm, which is one more dynamic or adaptive routing algorithm. There are 5 phases which are important here, 5 steps through which the link state routing algorithm goes. The first is to discover, each of the router must first discover its neighbors. Discover means that whether they are approachable, etc. And initially learn what are their network addresses. Second is to measure the delay or cost to reach each of its neighbors. So that may be either of the metrics that you have seen previously. Next is construct a packet telling whatever that it has just learned. Next, send a broadcast or send out these packets to all other routers. Ultimately, the fifth step is to compute the shortest path from all the information it has given. It has given, or it has received from its remaining routers. That shortest path will be calculated for the remaining routers, and based on the information that it has received from the remaining routers. So the first step of learning about the neighbors. So when a new router is booted, or maybe a router which was, which has already gone down previously, it comes up. It has to first learn its immediate neighbors, for which it has to send a hello packet on each point-to-point line. The router on the other end is expected to send a reply telling that who it is. and that means it will advertise its address, network address, for which it is required that each router must have a globally unique name. If two or more routers are connected by a LAN, we can model the LAN as a node, which we'll see in this diagram now. So imagine A, C, and F, they are connected through a LAN. So it is physical. There are physical. I mean, actually, there are many lines. This one is one line. This is one line, etc. But logically, the A is connecting through C through this LAN. C is connecting to F through this LAN. That's why it is logical to model this particular LAN, the whole LAN, as one node. So the graph model of this subnet is depicted in this diagram B. So here the LAN, which has got many different physical lines, is simply modeled with as a node, and that node will be now designated to one physical node in the network. So this is what is called as the learning about the neighbors. What are the neighbors and what are their network addresses? This is how each router, when it comes up, tries to know. Second is measuring the line cost. Once it knows that these are the neighbors, what cost is there to approach those neighbors or the the routers in the subnet? And to calculate this, each router next will send one echo packet measuring the round. And what is the echo packet? When the echo packet is sent, the response, I mean the destination has to reply because of the ICMP protocol. So the receiver of the echo packet will reply back to the sender, and that packet will now come back to the source. Now this is what is called as the round trip delay. Let me try to show you. Well, this is one router sender, and this is one of the destination routers. So whenever that echo packet is sent, the destination will send the reply back to the sender. So this is the echo packet, okay, and the corresponding reply will be there. So it will take some propagation time to reach here, and correspondingly this reply will also take some time to come back. So in a practical situation, the times may be different because of some load, or maybe the packets are lost, or whatever it may be. So to measure the actual time it takes to reach this router, particular this router from this router, this packet propagation time added to the reply transmission time, propagation time, that is what is called as the round trip delay. Round trip from this router to this router and back to the original router, that is what is round trip delay. So that will be in ideal case double than the propagation delay for the initial journey of the echo packet from this source to this destination, ignoring maybe some calamities in the reverse path, or maybe in the sending line as well. So the round trip delay will be divided into two, and that process will be repeated to have a better estimation of what is the average propagation delay from the source router to the destination router. Now even after the propagation delay is calculated, so the bandwidth and accordingly the propagation delay may be there. So the third parameter is that if, as we have just seen, if the line is loaded, the propagation time will be more. If the line is not loaded, the propagation time will be lesser. So whether to take the load into account, so there are two approaches. The load may be considered, or that may not be considered. So what happens, what does it mean to consider the load? So we know that whenever a router sends packets to some outward direction to some other router, basically the packets, there may be multiple packets and there is one queue which is the sending buffer. So this is a queue. So when a packet is ready, that will be shifted into the queue, and that packet will be going outward. So when the router or the packet reaches the head of the queue here, and this is what is called as the end of the queue. So after it reaches the end of the queue, then it will be transmitted. So if there are multiple packets already present in the queue, it will take longer for the packet which is just inserted in the queue at the head. It will take longer to reach the end, so that the previous packets have to be initially transmitted. Then this packet can go to the end, and then it will be sent on the line. So if there are multiple packets in the buffer or in the line, that is called as the load. So if load is more, it will take longer for this packet to reach the line and then to the destination. So if this router is considering the load, it will start measuring the transmission delay when the echo packet is initially queued. It will start from that instance. Now, if the unloaded line is taken for the calculation, that will give obviously better performance, but the load, if it is there and if it is not there, so based on these two situations, the load may oscillate, and correspondingly the time will also change. Now the second category, that is ignoring the load. Here the transmission delay will be started. It will start calculating the transmission delay from the instance when the packet reaches the front of the queue. It will not calculate the time for the journey of the packet from the initial position here in the queue up till the front of the queue or end of the queue, you can say. So that is what is called as ignoring the load in the buffer or line, you can say. Now there is one more situation. We have seen that the dynamic routing algorithms will calculate the path or the shortest path based on the taking into account the load. So imagine the two subnet or one single subnet which is connected with two lines. One is CF and second is EI. One part of the network subnet is in the east direction, and one is obviously in the west and east direction. So CF is one line and EI is the second line, which are connecting the two parts, east and west. Now imagine in the first go or initially, the CF line has got more load, it is flooded with packets. And that's why obviously the packets will be diverted onto EI, because the propagation delay, if it is taken into account, it will obviously take, when the load is taken into account, the propagation delay will be more through CF, and that's why the packets will always be diverted or take the route of EI. Now if all the routers continue to send the packets through EI, eventually the load on EI will also increase, and the EI line will get flooded, and the propagation delay for that will also increase. Due to this, now the routers will calculate this change and now start diverting the packets through onto the CF line. Now the same thing happens after some time with the CF line, and this continues to repeat, and eventually the transmission is said to oscillate between CF and EI. Now there are many approaches like multipath transmission, multipath forwarding it is called as, where there are multiple paths from this part to this part are present. Not only two lines will be used, there will be multiple, the traffic will be forwarded onto multiple paths. That's why one single line will not always be flooded. The second approach is not to allow the routers to continuously shift the lines so that there are oscillations. So whatever may be the possibility, there will be dynamic changes in the paths or the calculation of the cost of the line. Now with those cost calculation, the third step is to build the link state packets containing that cost information. So that packet or the link state packet will have information like what is the node ID, what is the sequence number of that particular packet, what is the age, list of neighbors, and the cost to approach that particular neighbor. Now, one example is for this subnet in this diagram, one example of the link state package generated is shown here. So, A will have a link state package generated with this format. The source is node ID is A. What particular sequence number, which version is there for that link state packet, that will be the sequence number. We'll see what is age afterwards. And A's neighbors are B and E. For each of those neighbors, what cost A has calculated will be put into the corresponding entry. For B, it takes 4, and for E, it takes 5. Similarly, B, C, D, E, F, they will calculate their own link state packets. Now, building the link state packet this way is very easy. The hard part is to determine when these packets should be built. Now, one approach is to build them periodically after some time instance, or that may be generated. Those packets may be generated after some event occurs. For example, a router or a line coming up or going down, or there are changes in the load of the lines, for example. Next is the distribution of the link state packets which have just been generated, which is the trickiest part here. The basic idea is to use flooding technique to distribute the link state packets to the neighbors or the remaining routers, you can say. Now, what is flooding? Basically, flooding is a technique in which a packet which is received will be forwarded to all the other lines than the one from which it has come. Let me repeat. So imagine this router is receiving a packet from this router. So like this. So this router now, which is connected to the remaining 3 routers like as shown, this router will send that packet to all the remaining routers other than the router from which the packet was received. So the packet will be forwarded to these remaining lines, not onto back to this line. So this is what is called as flooding technique. Now, due to which the number of packets which are sent onto network will increase dramatically, and to keep the flood in control, each packet contains a sequence number that is increased one by one for each new packet. Now, when the link state packet arrives, every router will check if it is new. If it is a old packet, it has to be discarded. For example, if it is new packet, yes, it will forward it to all the outgoing lines except the one on which it has arrived. And if it is having the older sequence number or the duplicate of the previous sequence number received, so it will simply, the router which I just received will be discarding it. Now there are some problems due to the properties or maybe some shifting in the sequence number. As the sequence number is there with one variable, that when the variable is exhausted, the maximum number that can be represented with that variable length, if it is approached, the sequence number will wrap around. So the solution is to use 32-bit sequence number, because with those 32-bit sequence number, it will take 137 years for the sequence number to wrap, and that is physically, I mean, not approach in that time calculation. It is too long. Next, the router itself crashes, and that's how the sequence number starts again from the initial value of 0, and that's why it becomes either duplicate or lesser than the sequence number which is already received, and that's why it is rejected. The sequence number may be corrupt due to some line problems. We have seen initially there can be the packet value may change due to some noise in the network. For example, the initial sequence number which was 4, now it is changed to 65540. The bits change, and that's how due to this the packets from 5 to this value 65540 will always be rejected, even though they were expected to be taken into account. That's a problem. And to remove these problems, we use what is called as the age property in the sequence number or the link state packets. That's one number that decreases, which is initially initialized to one value, and that decreases by 1 per second. The packet is discarded when the age value approaches 0. Now the essence is that to keep the packet for a particular, for example, every millisecond, if the age decreases by 1 and the age value is initially simply initialized to 10, every packet will be there, or maybe if it is initialized to, let us say, 50, that packet will be only existing for 50 milliseconds in the network. No packet will continue to exist and will flood the network. But the problem with this approach is that packet won't last for a long time. For example, if a packet is going through a line and that line is corrupt, that packet always is discarded through that line, or that packet goes corrupt, that may not be possible for that packet to reach the destination, because one line is there which is deleting or discarding that packet or changing that packet, making that packet corrupt over short distance. Now, for the distribution phase, each router uses a table to maintain the link state packets, here as shown in the figure here. So each row is for a recently received but not processed packet. Now the packet buffer for router B is shown here in this diagram or table, where each entry includes the source address, like from which other router it has come. The first entry is received from A, for the packet which is received from A. The second entry is the sequence number for that link state packet. The third entry is for age. The next two set of columns, which is are called as send and acknowledge flags. So there is one data as well, but we'll now try to know what are send flags and acknowledge flags. So send flags basically mean that particular bit for the corresponding router will be set if the received link state packet is to be sent to that neighbor. Now, for the first entry, for the packet which is received from A to B, B has to send the packet to its remaining neighbors like C and F. That's how, as the packet was received from A, B will not send it back to A. That's why the send flag for A is 0, whereas the send flags for C and F, they are 1, indicating the packet which is received from A is only to be sent to C and F. But as the packet was received from A, B has to acknowledge only A, not to C and F. Similarly, the entry is there with F. Now, there is one situation where the packet is received from one router E to B, through the path EAB once and second from the path EFB. So B knows that the packet has been received from the neighbors A and E for E, and that's why the packet has been received from A and F, and that's why B is not attempting to send that link state packet back to A and F, and correspondingly the send flags for A and F are 0 and B is only sending that packet to C. That's why the send flags for C is 1. Whereas as the packet was received from the two neighbors A and F, they are to be acknowledged, and that's why the acknowledged flags A and F are 1. So as the packet is not coming from C, it is not to be acknowledged at C. So similar is the case with D as well. You can check afterwards. Now for C, we'll imagine this is the initial scenario which is obvious. Now the packet which is received from C has to be sent on to the remaining neighbors A and F. That's why the send flags are 1 here, whereas it has to simply acknowledge C from which the packet is received. Now imagine the scenario when a particular packet is received and a copy of the packet is coming through F. So the packet is received from C as well as through F. So it has to only send that packet to A, not to C and not to F. So it has to acknowledge the packet to C and F. Correspondingly, in this scenario, where the packet was received from C and the copy was received from F, the send flags will change to, so only it has to send to 1. That's why this will be 1, this will be 0, and it is already received from C as well as from F. That's why this will be 0 now. It has to acknowledge the packet to C and F. That's why the acknowledge flags for C and F will be 1. It is not accepting, or it is not receiving that link set packet from A. That's why this will be 0. So this is how the packet buffers will be there for each of the router. Now computing the actual routes or the shortest path. This is the last stage. Once a router has gathered the full set of link packets from its neighbors or the remaining routers, you can say, it knows all the nodes as well as the links which are required to reach those nodes. And this is how it can now logically construct the path to those nodes or the subnet graph. Now, this is the place that router can run the Dijkstra's algorithm to find the shortest path from itself to other nodes. Now, for a network with n routers and each with k neighbors, for every router has to calculate the path or has to know the link state from its neighbors, and that's why the memory required is n into k. For example, every router has to know the link state buffers or the vectors from its k neighbors, and there are n routers. The overall memory which is required to be stored for the network is nk. And that is the reason, if there are a large number of nodes, the memory required as well as the computational time required will be exponential, and that may be a problem. But actually it requires works fine for practical networks or situations. So there are basically two protocols which are used for computing the routes. One is the initial, which is called as intermediate system ISIS, which is used in some of the internet backbone, NSFNET, and the recent protocol which is called as Open Shortest Path First, OSPF, which is used in the internet. So in this way, basically we have seen the two dynamic routing algorithms. One is the distance vector routing and second is the link state routing in this video. Thank you.